You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Clemson Tigers got the South Carolina Gamecocks back in their own home stadium in 2023. Can Shane Beemer and the Gamecocks get paid back in 2024, or will Dabo Swinney create a new winning streak against the Gamecocks?
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation and Tiger Nation. Welcome to this special rivalry crossover edition between the Locked On Gamecocks and Locked On Clemson podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks and Clemson Tigers every single day. I'm Locked On Gamecock podcast host Andrew Lyon. Pleased to be joined by Locked On Clemson host John Bivens. We're going to be talking a lot about the Palmetto Bowl in today's show. Shane Beemer and Dabo Swinney both have a lot of pressure on them to win this season. Who has more pressure? Which stadium has the best home field environment? And how will Clemson look on the offensive and defensive side of the ball? And subsequently, how will the Gamecocks look with all the changes they've had in their personnel this offseason? We'll be diving into all of that on today's crossover show. But before we get into all of that, I want to let y'all know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. John, how are we doing today?
Hey, man, nice to meet you, Andrew. Nice to be able to hop on here. Appreciate the invite. Doing well. How about yourself?
Man, I can't complain too much. It's the end of the week, and it's going to be a special one for me. This is actually my last show here on the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, but I'm going to obviously save all of that for you South Carolina Gamecock fans at the end of the show. Got a lot we got to dive into about the Palmetto Bowl, John. So let's go ahead and get right into it with both head coaches, because in their own different way, John, I think it's fair to say Shane Beemer and Dabo Swinney, they've both got a unique pressure on them heading into this next season to win a bunch of ball games. For Shane Beemer, it's pretty obvious. Went 5-7 in 2023, first losing season in his 3 years so far in Columbia. And Gamecock fans do not want to see him go 2 years in a row without making it to a bowl game. For Dabo Swinney, it's a little bit different. They've continued to win a bunch of games under Swinney's watch, but they have slowly regressed as far as the win column is concerned over the last 4 or 5 years. And so Clemson fans are kind of wondering, are we still a championship contender, maybe even in just the ACC alone? So, John, who do you think needs this game more, potentially, from a rivalry standpoint and just an overall standpoint as far as the pressure is concerned from their respective fan bases?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to give two different answers for both of those things. So I think overall, I think Clemson needs it a little bit more. The reason I say that is the ACC definitely has seen a wider area of talent recently. I think for a while, especially those years when Clemson was winning it every year, there wasn't a top 2, top 3 team that was consistent. And I think we're starting to see the difference in that with FSU coming around, possibly Miami. Miami seems like they're having an uptick. So I think in order for us to make the ACC championship, you said it, we're no longer like, are we championship national title contenders? Are we even ACC champion title contenders? And so in order for us to be there, we've got to lose maybe one game this year. I think if we lose more than one game, we're probably not playing for that ACC championship game. And so the fact that we open the season with Georgia, then the middle of the season we have FSU in October, and then we play y'all at the end of the season, very tough games. And so overall, I'm going to go Clemson needs it from a program stance. On the opposite side of that, I'm going to say South Carolina for the rivalry. And the reason I say that is because y'all won 5. Y'all had a nice streak going with a 5-game win streak, and it was a very depressing time as a Clemson fan. And then we followed that up with a little streak of our own, having a good couple years there for a while, and then we went back and forth. I think if Clemson wins this game, it could be the start of a new streak, the start of something different. Where if South Carolina wins this, it keeps that rivalry like, no, it's nothing. Especially last year with the win that we had without an offensive touchdown. If y'all win this game, it completely gets rid of last year's win, and it's still that back and forth. Who's going to take the rivalry? No streaks allowed. So it's a big, important game for both programs either way.
Yeah, John, I think I absolutely agree with your points on that. From an overall standpoint, I do think that Clemson needs this a little bit more. From a rivalry standpoint, I certainly agree that it's South Carolina, because if the Gamecocks were to win in 2024, hypothetically speaking, it'd be the first time since they had that 5-year winning streak that they have won, 2 out of the last 3 meetings against Clemson. And it would be a little bit more unique if they were able to do it once again in Death Valley up there in the upstate. So, for Shane Beemer, look, I know a lot of fans, they like to say how, hey, we could go 1-11 every year, but if that one win is against our arch rivals, Clemson in this case, we're going to be okay. I honestly have never really believed that, and I don't think Gamecock fans would be okay with a situation like that this year. They got to make it back to a bowl game. So if they just get 6 wins, even if one of those wins isn't against Clemson, it's still like, okay, we did see a repeat of last year. We at least took another step back in the right direction. So absolutely agree with both of your points on that regard. But the other thing that's unique about this year, John, is that the Gamecocks and Tigers, they're going back to sort of playing a cupcake game between before the Palmetto Bowl takes place. South Carolina last year, I know they played the Kentucky Wildcats, for example, before they played Clemson. I don't remember exactly who Clemson played. Do you recall?
It was an ACC opponent. I don't remember exactly who it was. I can pull it up. But.
Okay, right. So either way, both teams had to play a conference game. And usually, for the final game of the season, from a coach preparation standpoint, probably don't want to have to deal with something like that. But, I also kind of feel like, John, it takes a little bit away from the rivalry, because instead of, being able to focus on another team and then have that whole next week, holiday week, or actually it's not going to be a holiday week this year because of the extended schedule, but to have just 1 week looking ahead, I think it's a little bit better. But being able to look over Citadel and Wofford and Clemson, South Carolina's case, respectively, I think that takes a little bit of juice out of it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think looking back at the past couple years, I don't remember, was the Tennessee game in 2022 the game before Clemson, or was it 2 weeks before?
Yes,
the game before, right? So
right.
I would 100% agree. I think looking back at those years, I'm a part of the rivalry. Look, I respect you. You seem like an awesome guy. I love your show. You are doing great stuff over there. I'm not a fan of the Gamecocks. Sorry, Locked On Gamecock Nation. But with that being said, the rivalry is so much more fun when there's momentum involved. When the teams are coming in off a big win. Last year, I looked it up. That's right. We played Carolina the week before y'all. We played North Carolina the week we played y'all. Sorry, correction there.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. I'm from North Carolina. That was no kind of shade being shot, I promise. But we had that big win on ESPN. RG3 was there running down the hill with Dabo. This huge momentum going. Had that big win against North Carolina, and then we go into y'all. Again, that's Freudian slip, but we go into that game with y'all, and there's both teams are coming off really big wins against conference opponents, coming in with a lot of momentum, a lot of energy, couple of big wins. I think it just adds a whole new level of hype, of momentum that carries in and helps build that rivalry up compared to this year playing teams that we should not lose. Either of us should not lose that game. If we do, completely different conversation. But yeah, I think it takes away from the excitement because it's like, you had to have a warm up.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you on that. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, South Carolina wants to play like a Georgia or an Alabama before they play Clemson. That would not be fair. Same deal with Clemson. I don't think they would want to play like a Florida State or maybe a Miami or like a tough NC State squad on the road. I don't think either team would want that, but still, I totally agree with you. Conference game, winning conference games, both teams have done that the last couple years, and it's just made the rivalry week just that much more imperative. And last year, for South Carolina, it was to go to a bowl game, and unfortunately, they weren't able to win each of their final 4 games. Clemson stopped them in the last week, but still, it made for a lot of excitement and thrill going into the matchup. Now, speaking of excitement and thrill, I want to talk to you about an interesting conversation that got started up by EA Sports College Football 25. For those that missed it earlier this week, they released their top 25 toughest places to play. I think based on like winning percentage the last 10 years in each team's home stadium. You could debate all you want where teams were slotted, whatnot, but Clemson was slotted 12th, Memorial Stadium, and then Williams-Brice Stadium for South Carolina was slotted 15th. So, John, for a little bit of fun here, make the argument why Clemson's home field environment's better, and I'll do the same for Williams-Brice. Take it away.
Yeah, so when I'm saying this for Clemson, I do want to start by saying I'm not taking anything away from you. South Carolina's got a great home environment. Y'all, respect there for sure. Sandstorm is electric. Before getting ready for this, I was watching videos of y'all's, and gosh, that game before the Kentucky game last year gave me goosebumps. It was wild. But with that being said, I think Clemson I think Clemson takes it by a little bit, just because it's the most exciting 25 seconds in football. Like, it's dubbed that. We've got the hill, whether you hate it, whether you love it. It's just excitement, no matter day game, no matter night game. What's going on? There's energy there. Fans are there. You've got the traditions. You've got the momentum. I wish that we still did balloons. I'm glad we don't, for environment issues. Obviously terrible for the environment. But just the balloons going up while they were running down the hill, that was always fun. But just the aspect of seeing everybody get involved, the chants going on, the tiger paws going, the mascots are going wild, Dabo's sprinting like he's doing a shot race. It's energetic. There's nothing but energy going on.
Yeah, no, there's definitely one thing I will give Clemson for their home field environment. I think it's definitely one of the most unique in all college football. And I think you can say the same about South Carolina's. And, for Carolina, obviously they're not running down a hill for their entrance, but they've got 2001: A Space Odyssey. Don't know any other school, any other college out there in America that uses that. And I think that they took it and they've done a great job of like forming their entire entrance around that. Obviously, you got Sandstorm with the LED lights. Now it's just an absolute party whenever they start that up. You got the towels, especially in the student section. You've got the Rooster Crow, especially on third downs, which opposing fans and even some writers and reporters for other teams, they have no issue saying, I hate that Rooster Crow. It's the most annoying thing I've ever heard in my life. Why do y'all play? It's like, great. That's the point. We want to get in y'all's head. We want to annoy the heck out of y'all. We don't want y'all to forget about all that stuff. And I'm sure for Clemson, y'all have like a Tiger Roar sound effect that you'll use for certain moments in y'all's game as well. So I think that, obviously I'm going to stick with South Carolina. Like, I'm going to say they're just a little one notch above. But I think for both home fields, for both fan bases, they definitely can make a good argument that, hey, both of ours are up there as far as being the best home field environments in all college football, especially when it's a night game, especially when it's a big game and the team's doing well, or maybe they are on a little mini winning streak heading into said matchup. So it's great stuff there. But what about the actual team itself? Both teams going through some personnel changes offensively, defensively this next season. What could Tiger fans and Gamecock fans expect from the other side? We'll dive into all of that in a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks and Locked On Clemson.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Again, keep your ride or die alive. Burn rubber, not money at ebaymotors.com.
Welcome back to this Friday crossover edition between the Locked On Gamecocks and Locked On Clemson podcast, where we cover the South Carolina Gamecocks and Clemson Tigers every single day. And as always, a big thank you to all of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks or Locked On Clemson podcast your first choice for South Carolina Gamecock and Clemson Tiger sports coverage. John, let's talk about both teams now. I want to start off with your team. Let's talk a little bit about Dabo Swinney. Look, if anyone says Dabo Swinney's on the hot seat, like he has to do well this season to keep his job at Clemson, I think that they're absolutely nuts. Like they're drinking something that's got to be checked, right? 100%. But I do think it's also fair to say there's a portion of the Clemson fan base that is kind of worn thin on Dabo and, his whole stance against maybe the transfer portal, the NIL era in college football, maybe feel like that he's holding them back a little bit at this point because of his personal beliefs. which are admirable in certain instances, but also, again, you could argue they've hurt the Tigers. What do you think he has to do to win those fans back, even just a majority of those fans in 2024?
I think it's simple. I think he's got to win. I think fans got really spoiled for Clemson, and I'm a part of that. We had some great years, playoffs for consecutive years, ACC champions for so many years in a row. I think now we've gone a little bit down, and I like to throw this stat out because I think it shows a lot of what the difference in Clemson is. From 2016 to 2020, we were third best in QBR. Our quarterback rating was third best in the nation. From 21 to this past year, we were 73rd. So that huge drop, huge drop. And I think that is all around. Our defense has kind of stayed true from who it is, that identity they have. But our offensive, it's definitely the prowess is gone from the offense. And I think Dabo, in order to prove these fans wrong, he's got to show that this offense can be that team, can score, they can win the games. Honestly, I think if we make it to the ACC championship game and lose, or even if we don't make it, nothing's going to get better for him. I think, honestly, he's got to win the ACC, which would give us a spot in that college football playoffs. I don't think it's going to take a national championship. I think if he makes it to that playoffs, has a competitive game, if we go get blown out, different story, but I don't think that would happen. But if we make it to that playoffs, and even if we maybe lose the ACC championship and still get that second spot somehow in the playoffs, I think that's still there. But there's got to be some high-level postseason play happening.
Yeah, and, with the playoff now being 12 teams deep, that's only going to heighten the pressure for coaches like Dabo Swinney to maybe make it back to the playoff. And then for Shane Beemer's side of things, here's the thing I'll say about him. I think it's definitely fair to say, again, Beemer, he needs to win at least 6 games this year. Carolina fans are not going to sit there and say, you got to go to Atlanta. Carolina fans are understanding that right now we just got to get back to taking a couple steps forward. We can't expect them to just win 4 or 5 more games than they did in 2023. But for Shane, the other thing he's got to do is I think he needs to show growth as a head coach. I'm not one of those people that sits there and says, like some other people in the SEC, that, Shane Beemer is a petulant child. He's not mature enough. Sometimes he's a bit petty. He certainly has had his moments where he's put his own foot in his mouth. Him and Dabo kind of both, I think, are similar in that sense. Like sometimes they wear their emotions on their sleeve a little bit too much, and it leads to a strong statement that maybe you look back on, you say, you probably could have left that better unsaid. But for Beemer, I'm curious to see how he grows as a coach. How does he handle tough moments? The schedule's daunting again. South Carolina is going to take a couple of beatings again this year. Like, they still just don't have enough depth at a couple of spots to where sometimes they're going to get exposed. How does he handle that? And last year, he had a couple moments, whether it was after the Florida game, kicking a Gatorade cooler, breaking a bone in his foot, and then kind of throwing his players under the bus at the start of that presser. Or, maybe it was back in the offseason. He lost a positional coach on offense and then kind of turned around and made it out like, well, this other guy he just hired was his number 1 guy on along. Gamecock fans can't dispute Beemer's had some gaffes in pressers. So I'm curious to see how much better he is in that regard. I truly think he's going to show that he's a different coach in 2024. If he doesn't, and we see maybe more of the same along with the losses, then that's when Gamecock fans are really going to start to worry, hey, is he the guy that we can trust to lead this program heading into the future? Now, from a player's standpoint, John, I want to talk about Cade Klubnik for a second. 2023 was an interesting situation for him. I think that's the simplest way to put it, but going a bit in depth, Garrett Riley, first-year coordinator, gave Clemson fans a lot of hope that this year is going to be different. We're going to go back to the years of Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, elite quarterback play, high-flying offense. And just didn't really seem to see that. I know there were some issues at wide receiver. Maybe some guys did not develop or step up last year. Some guys were banged up. And Klubnik, admittedly himself, he had his own share of moments where it was just like sometimes you had to cover your eyes and just hope that the play didn't end in a negative way for Clemson. Do you think that Cade Klubnik is going to be a better quarterback in 2024?
Better, yes. Do I think he's going to reach the hype that everybody had for him? No. I think he's definitely got skill. He's definitely got a great quarterback, but he came in so hyped. I mean, super number one prospect, number 1 quarterback out of Texas. He came in really hyped. I think he's going to be better. I think we're going to see improvements. I think he's had a year under Garrett Riley. He's had a full offseason under him. He kind of had 2 off seasons because they brought him in real early last year. But I think he is going to be better. Honestly, I think the biggest thing is going to be when Garrett Riley came in, him and Dabo Swinney kind of brought out this phrase called the dirt raid. talking about how they're going to bring back the ground game. Will Shipley, Phil Maffa is going to come back and rush all over. And I think because our receivers, like you talked about, didn't pull their weight last year on some levels. Cade Klubnik makes some terrible mistakes, like the FSU game. A couple bad reads there cost us the game in overtime.
Right.
I think if Cade's able to just provide a little bit more consistency, less turnovers, it allows our rush game to get going, and that's when we'll see the offense that Garrett Riley really wants. So, answer your question, I do think he'll be better. I don't know if he'll be the quarterback we all thought he was.
Yeah, and then for Tiger fans who might be sitting there wondering, well, we hear a lot about Lenore Sellers for South Carolina the last few months, and y'all are talking him up like he could be the best quarterback ever. What do we need to expect from him? With Sellers, I definitely think the thing I worry about as a Gamecock fan, John, is I kind of worry about the pressure getting to Sellers this season, because again, this is a pivotal year for Carolina. Again, they've got to win at least 6 games. They've got to go bowling again, and they've had a lot of changes on offense. Xavier Legette at wide receiver, now playing for the Carolina Panthers in the NFL, bringing a lot of new transfers at that spot, a lot of transfers at running back. Offensive line was subpar, to say the least, last year, even if you want to say they had a bunch of injuries, which is also true. Sellers is going to have to come in and be the man for South Carolina immediately. And the good thing is he seems like that he has a very calm, cool, and collected mentality when he's on the football field. He doesn't let a lot of things get to him, which is great. But he also has yet to play a game where you're the guy, you're the starter, you're the person everybody's going to be looking to for answers when things go wrong. How are you going to handle all that? That's the question Lenore Sellers is going to have to answer when this season kicks off in late August. But looking at defense real quickly, John, last thing for you before we head on for today. The Tigers, y'all lose a good group of both star power, but also some experienced guys like Nate Wiggins at cornerback, Andrew Makuba at safety, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Tyler Davis, Xavier Thomas, a bunch of players, again, mixture of talent and also some guys that played a lot of years in that Clemson defense. But you also had some freshmen step up. Khalil Barnes, TJ Parker, most notably. Peter Woods had some good moments. Avion Terrell, I know Clemson fans are excited about up there as well. How do you think that defense is going to handle the losses as far as personnel goes in 2024?
I think it's definitely going to be tough. You see some great names on there. And honestly, the one that hurts the most is Andrew Makuba, just because that was a transfer rather than graduate. And that one hurts. Hate him seeing. I think he's at Texas now. But I think what's going to be really big, and the most vital thing for us, is going to be if Barrett Carter can step up. That linebacker for us, he's definitely going to be the captain of that side. If he can come out, step up, and truly be there, I think we'll be good. Honestly, Clemson's used to losing players. We have a lot of draftees, especially on the defensive line side. It feels like almost like a rotating line, just because they'll sit for a couple years and then they'll come out and play 1 or 2 years and play great. But I think it's going to be well. I think Barrett Carter's going to help us get over that wood, help us come over that. I think there's some freshmen that's going to be great. I think Sammy Brown, a freshman linebacker coming in, he's going to help carry the load. And the players you mentioned, Avion Terrell, Khalil Bars, they've got to be big. They've got to continue progressing. So I think we'll be well. I think defense will still be our strong side. But we'll have to see. What about South Carolina's side? What's y'all's defense looking like this year?
Yeah, I think for South Carolina, John, last couple of years been a bit lackluster under Clayton White. I would actually probably go as far to say that he was yay close. For those watching you on YouTube right now, my fingers are about maybe an inch apart. He was very close getting fired at the end of last season, but they started running a 3-3-5 against Clemson included, but Kentucky and Vanderbilt as well, saw some improvement. So Shane's decided to run it back one more year, I think, just to see, hey, can we build off of that? And this defense for Carolina got a lot of experience this year. I think that they're going to be better in the defensive front. They bring in Kyle Kennard from Georgia Tech, so Clemson fans, you might be very familiar with him. He transferred in this offseason. Dylan Stewart, 5-star edge rusher out of Washington, D.C., Gamecock fans, and I think people in that building expect him to make a big impact from day one. Safety's still going to be deep. Nick Emenwari comes back as a third-year starter. So does DQ Smith. Jalen Kilgore was a freshman All-American. South Carolina's got a lot of studs, I would say, in the middle of the field. Biggest question mark for them might be at corner. O'Donnell Fortune comes back, second-year starter, fifth-year player overall in college. So he should be good at the cornerback 1 spot. But the second cornerback spot right now is wide open. Bunch of guys competing there. So I think for Carolina, rush defense will be imperative on early downs. And then can those guys at the edge rusher position, which has been pretty much revamped, can they get to the quarterback or at least force these guys to make bad decisions early on? That'll be the keys for Carolina's defense in 2024. But with all that being said, John, it's been a lot of fun doing this crossover show with you For all you Locked On Gamecock fans, don't go away because I'm going to have one last thing to say to all of you before I end my final show. But John, thank you once again for coming on. For you Locked On Gamecock fans, be sure to check out Locked On Clemson on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts daily if you want more information on the Tigers. And for you Tiger fans, same deal with Locked On Gamecocks on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on social media as well. John, appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it, man. Hope to see you with a winning record in November for an electric game.
Absolutely. Same to y'all. We'll be back here in just a couple moments.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Guess what, guys? I don't know if you noticed, but I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wound down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. I can picture it right now. Wow, dropping a bet on the Atlanta Braves to beat the Phillies, or the Yankees to beat the Boston Red Sox. Oh, I can picture it right now. You can do the same exact thing. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. Stop dreaming and do it. I'm telling you, go do it right now. FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of Major League Baseball.
And that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Clemson podcast. Hey, thanks so much for joining us here as we had that special crossover episode with Andrew over at Locked On Clemson. Hey, let us know your thoughts on the topic. Hit us up on Twitter. Hit us up on YouTube. Drop a comment. We'd love to be a part and hear what you have to say. Hey, coming up next week, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. NBA draft happened. No PJ Hall. Really weird to see. But we're excited about where he's going with Nuggets reuniting with Hunter Tyson. Monday, we're going to dive into that and so much more topic. And we'll talk about so much more football too next week as we dive in and get closer and closer to this season. So make sure if you haven't, make sure you subscribe to us over on YouTube and wherever you're listening to your podcast. That way you can become an everyday listener and your first listen every single day can be right here on the Locked On Clemson podcast. We can't wait to see you next week. Until then, keep that Tiger pride alive and roaring. And as always, go Tigers.